Good afternoon, everybody. This is the Matt Zaborski Show calling live and direct from Prague, Czech Republic, the heart of Central Europe. It's very steamy, it's very sultry here, and not in a good way. We've been through a major heat wave here for the last 3 weeks, and hopefully it's going to break. And I'm here with Filip Kaczorowski.
Hey.
Good to have you here, Phil. Phil and I coach an American football team called the Prague Mustangs. We're not the head coach, that's Eric South. We coach the defense, especially the secondary. So I've learned a lot from Phil since I've met him in February. And there is no other bigger Eagles fan in the Czech Republic than Philip. And Philip, we just have to ask you, why on earth are you a fan of American football, and why are you a Philadelphia Eagles fan?
Hey, thank you, Matt. It's actually very simple. A couple of my friends dragged me to football. I think it was 2008 or 2009, and so I started playing, but it was more like PV league level of play this time back, because still American football is a very minor sport here in Czech Republic. But we started a fantasy league, and I didn't understand anything from it, so I had the auto pick, and the computer was very good because he picked Mike Vick and LeSean McCoy in the same draft. So because I was cheering for my team, and those were two of my best players, so I started to looking Eagles game to know how my players are performing, and I stick with the Eagles even when we don't have Mike Vick and LeSean McCoy anymore. So that's how I become Eagles fan.
So did you start coaching before you played fantasy, or was fantasy football your first go into American football?
No, I first started with American football as a player, but we didn't have any coaches. We were just playing around something like beer league here in Czech Republic, containing four teams and playing 7-man football. It was more like just for fun. I played for I think 4 or 5 seasons before I injured my knee. I had 2 surgeries and everything didn't went well, so I didn't want to leave the football because I started to love it. So I started with coaching, and I'm coaching for 5 years. So that's how I become a coach.
Yeah, I knew that you played before, but I didn't realize you hurt your knees, and I know that's a hard thing to do when you get injured and you can no longer play the way you used to. And I know that we have a situation in Philadelphia with Carson Wentz coming off knee injuries. But tell us a little bit about the Czech American Football League here. Like, how many teams are in the Czech Republic, and why do you think that Czech, both men and women, want to play American football?
I would start for the latter. I think the Czech people overall like sports. If you go to park here, you will see many people jogging or riding their bikes. If you go to Riverside, you will see a lot of those small canoes or boats, or how you call it. Czech Republic is a small country, 10 million of people, but we have one of the best hockey players in the world. We have a couple of best soccer players. So even in the smaller country, you can have good sports. And I think Czech American football, it's not top level in Europe, but we have a team called Prague Black Panthers, who used to play Austrian League, which is probably the top league in Europe, and they were good contributors. So yeah, the American football is getting much popular here over the last, I think, 4 or 5 years. So the new teams are growing in the smaller local cities and so on. And we have now 3 leagues. We have in 11 football and 1 league in 9-man football for the new teams. And I think it's around 30 teams here right now, divided in those 4 leagues.
Yeah, it's amazing that there's 30 teams here in the Czech Republic. When I tell my friends I'm coaching American football, they're just like, well, how many teams are there? Like 8 or 9, and no, there's 30. And we were fortunate enough to have the U.S. ambassador come to our first game. And convincing him wasn't so hard, but what was interesting was his impression. If you remember that first game, he thought we were just going to be in some field playing pickup game, 7-on-7, and go from there. And they were very impressed about the organization of this league. And I've been very impressed with the league itself. As an American, it's interesting to see the age differences. We have players as young as 18, 20, all the way up to 45, even older than me, playing. And then you just have the way they embrace the sport, and I think we've had one or two American players compared to the Czech players. We just embrace the sport a little bit differently. But the bottom line is the Czechs that we've coached are very competitive. They want to win, and they go out, but they also really enjoy the camaraderie, whether it's with the other team after the game or with their own players. So it's a really interesting experience here as an American to coach. I've really enjoyed the time, and I look forward to continuing it with you guys for the Prague Mustangs this season coming up. When I said Philip is one of the bigger Eagle fans, he's probably the biggest. Right now he's sitting in a DeMarco Murray jersey. Every time I see Philip, he's got an Eagles hat on, an Eagles t-shirt. If he doesn't have that, his wallpaper on his phone is Eagles. The skin on his Surface Pro tablet is Eagles. It's just everything Eagles, Eagles, Eagles. And it was great to finally meet someone here who shares the same passion. So, Philip, I was in the U.S. for the Super Bowl. I was back home with my friends and family. But where were you watching the Super Bowl this year?
Yeah, so... after the sea is suffering here in Czech Republic because everyone is, I don't know why, I think it's some global problem, but everyone is cheering for Patriots. So for years they were laughing on me because I'm the fan of Eagles because they had those rings and everything. And I was very sad because I scheduled my holidays back in March 2017. I bought tickets to Philippines. And I was sad that I couldn't be here in Prague on our Super Bowl party laughing on the Patriots, but I spent a very nice morning on the Boracay Island in some sports bar there watching Eagles game live. There was some elder guy around 60 years old from South Philly, and so we were sitting at this table after the game almost crying together because he was waiting all life for it, and it was very nice experience. The sports bar was mainly Americans because local people probably doesn't know what American football is, so but it was great experience there. But I think in Prague it would be much better.
Yeah, exactly. When I watched the Super Bowl here in Prague, they have Hooters here, so that's where we would go with the American department from Charles University and get invited to that party. So jumping in, today officially ends the Super Bowl season. Mm-hmm. Tonight or tomorrow morning here in Prague is the first preseason game against the cross-state rivals, the Pittsburgh Steelers. Are you going to watch the game at all, Philip?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure. I actually like a preseason a lot, probably more than most of regular fans, because I like to see when the young players develop, or there are some underdog players like Patrick Robinson was last year who stepped up, and that's where the best players are born in. It's in preseason.
Yeah, exactly. It will be a good chance for those guys who barely make the roster to battle it out. But let's just look back for one last time. Last season, I'm sure you watched almost every game as much as possible. You and I both have the Game Pass, the NFL Game Pass, which is great when you're outside the U.S. to be able to watch the game. It's the same broadcast that my friends and family are watching back home with the same commercials. And it also has a coach's view and a condensed view, which is also a great aspect where you watch the entire game without any stoppages or commercials. But going in, did you ever have a sense that the team last year was going to be not only a Super Bowl playoff contender, but a Super Bowl contender? Do you remember like the top couple of moments from last season that we can reflect upon that made last season look like this team was really a legitimate contender?
It's hard to say. Like I wanted to keep my expectations very low because I had high expectation every year before. So it took me a lot of time to finally buy in. And when this happens, Carson Wentz injured the knee, and I was back on the ground as probably every Eagles fan. I don't think it was until mid of the Vikings playoff game when I was like, okay, they can win the Super Bowl. I still was keeping my expectations very low. The play there in the Vikings game was the flea flicker play, which is kind of surprising. Okay, they have the balls to call those plays and execute them, and I was starting like they can win Super Bowl. I was pretty sure from this play. But from highlights from the season, it definitely was the Carson Wentz magical escaping Redskins pass rush. It was the field goal in the Giants game, the 61-yarder from
Jake Elliott.
Jake Elliott, yeah. And there was a lot of great moments through the season, yeah.
A couple of things, I'll just reflect a little bit as well. I think Philip hit a couple of plays. The very first series of the season was when playing against the Redskins, and Carson Wentz broke out of a missed tackle, a missed sack. He made 2 or 3 guys miss, and I remember the last guy who missed him dove for his ankles, and Carson sort of stepped over him and then launched the ball about 20, 30 yards in the air to Nelson Aguilar, who went in for the touchdown the very first series. Now, I didn't think they were Super Bowl contenders then, but you knew you had something special with this guy, with Carson Wentz, and the way he played. And of course, I'll also reiterate when the Eagles rookie kicker Jake Elliott now is the longest kick in Eagles history to knock off the Giants. Because if you remember at that time in the season, the Eagles were 1-1, the Giants were 0-2. If the Giants win that game, the Eagles and Giants are tied at 1-2. Instead, Elliott comes off as a rookie who replaced Caleb Sturgis, who got hurt, I think in the first game or the second game. And Jake Elliott was snatched off the practice roster from the Cincinnati Bengals, and he had a lot of that big kick. He had a lot of big kicks throughout the season, to be honest, Jake Elliott. Then again, of course, the escape of the pocket also against the Redskins when Carson Wentz looked like he was eaten up and he just appears out of nowhere. I thought that was a great play. The Rams game when Carson Wentz does go down, Nick Foles comes off the bench. And he plays pretty much at a high level as well. So he, while the defense stepped up there, especially Chris Long, you saw Nick Foles there. One thing that I also reflect when I looked at the whole season, it's interesting that I become a secondaries coach just in February coincidentally, was that the defense last year, their secondaries by far, they were, I would say, average to above average. They weren't a great secondary. But the two things I would have to say, not just one, is as soon as the receiver made a catch, the guy was tackled almost right away. Mm-hmm. The yards after the catch, the Eagles rarely gave up yards after the catch. And I would say from the linebackers and the defensive backs, they knew where the first down marker was. In past, the Eagles basically, if it was 3rd and 7 or 3rd and 5, a lot of times those teams the opposing team would get the first down. But for something last year, the Eagles somehow knew how to stop them just short. So if it's 3rd and 7, they would get 5 or 6 yards. If it's 3rd and 4, they would get maybe 0 to 3 yards. And I thought that was a key aspect of the season, the tackling of the linebackers in the secondary. And let's go back and reflect to the playoff game. If Julio Jones doesn't slip, he probably makes that catch, and the Eagles lose in the opening round. They're the first number 1 seed ever to be an underdog. But let's go back to the greatest game in Eagles history. And even if you were not an Eagles or a Patriots fan, that was one of the best Super Bowls ever played.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you. The game was amazing. Like I'm a big fan of offensive football. On the other side, I was a little bit disappointed with the Eagles defense. As you said, they usually were holding the opposing offense for most of the game. Or even if they weren't holding the offense, they were able to stop them in the red zone and force them to just kick the field goal, or a couple of times even to block the field goal or go away with a turnover or something. But the game was amazing. I liked Corey Clement in that game. He definitely stepped up, and I'm very curious if he can continue with his progress this next season, because we saw over the years many of rookie players playing well in the first year and then disappear. I think his fellow running back Wendell Smallwood is a good example. He absolutely disappeared last year.
Yeah. Did you have any doubt in the Super Bowl game that you were like, man, this has been a great year, but I think the Patriots are going to win? Was there any doubt during the game?
Honestly, no. When I was happy to have my team in the Super Bowl, and the game was up and down, but all game long the Eagles has the upper hand, and when Doug called the Philly special, it was like, okay, this coach is great. Actually, Doug Peterson is a great coach for me, because what he's doing is what I was expecting from Chip Kelly, and like after this hype from Oregon and everything, like new offense and new schemes, everything, and he was very very defensive in his play calling, no surprises, but the Duck is very good with this.
Yeah, he stayed aggressive all year, and they call him Big Balls Doug after calling the 4th down, 4th and 2. We all know the Philly special play, the play they actually got from Chicago Bears. Nick Foles apparently convinced Doug to run the play, and Doug didn't really hesitate. They ran the play, and looking at the defensive coordinator of New England after they gave up the touchdown, Patriarch, who was now the head coach of the Lions, just the look on his face was just like, we did not see that coming. For me in the game, I did have a sliver of a doubt, but then I think Gostkowski missed the field goal, and when he missed it indoors, that to me was like the Eagles were definitely going to win. And after that miss, I definitely didn't think they had a chance to lose the game. Even on the Hail Mary pass, you just knew that it wasn't going to work.
I was kind of sad with the last play of Super Bowl because it was long throw. It fell into the end zone, and I was watching the play, and now it's end of the game, yes or no? So it wasn't that if the Brandon Graham had a great pass rush there, he just hit Tom Brady after this throw. So I think if Brandon Graham hit him a second earlier, and it was just end of the game at this moment, it will be much more joyful than it's end or no? Wait, yeah. Okay, so we can start cheering.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I share the same things. It was sort of anticlimactic because usually you see those plays, they're desperation plays, the Hail Mary, and then it hits the ground. Like, is it really over? Because even the players, I think, weren't ready to celebrate right away as if Brandon Graham would have made the sack and ended it that way. So that was the Super Bowl year. So question to you, are the Eagles team right now, on paper, better than the Super Bowl champion team?
That's always hard to say. I think they are, definitely. Yeah, I think Mike Wallace is upgrade over
Torrey Smith.
I think we know now that we have two great quarterbacks, which we didn't know before the season started. I think Carson Wentz is so dedicated and so freak of nature that he will be ready for first game. He will learn something, and he will be even better than he was last year. Our secondary and our D-line looks pretty deep at the moment. And Jason Peters healthy, Jordan Hicks healthy, Darren Sproles healthy. So yeah, they are definitely better now than they were at the end of the Super Bowl game.
Well, I guess my thing is that I'm not really sure. I have concerns with Carson Wentz. I have concerns that he might be the next RG3. That is a big possibility. Carson Wentz has only played one full season of football in the last 3 years. He's had injuries in college and now on the pro level. And as long as the Eagles manage him better than the Redskins did with RG3, in a sense that I think he will be able to become the future of the league. Much like the Redskins did. I was living in Washington when they drafted RG3. And the same hype around Carson Wentz was for RG3 back then. And we just have to hope that Peterson and Roseman and the powers that be, wrap him up. My prognosis is that he shouldn't play until around after the bye. That's when you and I will be in London watching the Jaguars-Eagles game in London. We both have tickets for that game. And next week is the bye, so we'll see where the Eagles are at that point. It seems like he may have suffered a little bit of a setback. They've been very hesitant with him. And the thing is why I say with RG3, like Carson wants to be ready for week 1. But RG3, his last real season with the Redskins, and he opened up against the Eagles, he did not take one preseason snap. So hopefully the Eagles are good with that.
I kind of disagree with you. If you remember Adrian Peterson back with Vikings, who had the same kind of injury, and he was able to came back from that injury and had that almost best season of any running back in history. I think he missed the record mark for rushing yard per season by 15, 16 yards, something like that. So I think Carson Wentz is the same freak of the nature as Adrian Peterson is. I think he will heal, and if you see any video from training camp, he doesn't seem that he has any troubles with the knee at the moment, which wasn't the case for RG3, if I remember correctly. He was wearing the brace for years. Yep. Carson Wentz, I don't think he's wearing the brace in some of those drills. He looks same mobile as he was before the injury. and I think he wants one ring won by himself, and
sure.
yeah, I think Carson is a very dedicated person to football. If you see any interview with him talking or anything.
I don't disagree with his dedication, and I think Adrian Peterson is just the only example in the history of seeing that. So that's tough legacy to live up to. My other concerns are at tight end. We have a great thing with this new Dallas Goedert, the rookie. And the best thing about him is that the draft was in Dallas. The Eagles drafted someone named Dallas in Dallas and actually traded ahead of the Dallas Cowboys to pick Dallas. But he's not a Brent Selleck. He's unproven yet. And there's not a Trey Burton to fall back on. We have this veteran named Rich Rodgers, who's kind of a journeyman tight end, good, solid veteran guy, but he's not. You don't want to rely on him going into the season as a starter, maybe a spot start here and there. So I have some issues there. I have some issues at linebacker, and I have issues at safety. And the reason is at linebacker and safety, I think there's not a lot of depth there at linebacker and safety. Hicks is also like Wentz. He's very he's like injury prone, maybe more so than Wentz.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, definitely. But I'm the tight ends. I think Dallas Goedert could be very good. All the reports from training camp and from off-season and spring practices are he's almost unstoppable in the red zone. So if he can lift the hype, we are looking at another Gronkowski-Hernandez combo. I think it will be very hard for opposing defense to stop all the playmakers Eagles have at the moment. Mm-hmm. I'm more worried about the receivers, to be honest. Like Mike Wallace is an elder player, he has experience, but can he be the top player again? Who knows? Alshon Jeffrey had the rotator surgery after the season. Mike Hollins is very unproven. We don't know if Nelson Aguilar can be same as he was in the past season, or is he going to return his first 2 years? Who knows? Yeah. So my biggest concerns on the Eagles depth chart right now are the receivers. Okay. And the lucky thing is our running backs are very good receivers, both Darren Sproles and Corey Clement, and we have 3 tight ends capable of playing as a starters or as a receivers in Ertz, Goddard and Richard Rodgers. So I don't think it will be big problem. On the other side, Brent Selleck was great, but those last 2-3 years he was more blocker than a receiver. So I think any of the offensive linemen can help out there as blocking tight end, because last year Isaac Seumalo was doing this, and Eagles are not shy to show we are going to run. We are sending 6 linemen there. So you'll see. Linebackers are definitely the weak spots. Yeah, Jordan Hicks is hurt every season. He's almost like Sean Lee. We are laughing at Sean Lee for years, but Jordan Hicks at the moment looks the same injury-prone player as he is. Nigel Berdham is suspended for 1 game. And who knows who will play the third linebacker spot. I think Kamugruji here can win it. I really like this player. I liked how he was the replacement on the kicker spot in the Dallas game. I liked how he carried out the kicker.
When Jake Elliott
after that long field goal, so it's very likable person, and I'm cheering for him.
Okay, what about the safety position? You have McLeod, you have the leader of the defense, and Malcolm Jenkins, and then they just signed Corey Graham, who did win a Super Bowl. It's a pretty thin position.
Yes, I'm a big fan of Malcolm Jenkins. It's one of my favorite defensive players on Eagles roster by far. Roddy McLeod is a little bit average player, maybe better. He has a high contract. You could go worse. Do you remember Nate Allen and this kind of players? So
the infamous Nate Allen, who Donovan McNabb was traded for. Basically.
So we could go worse. We can be better. We have a couple of rookies there in Tress Sullivan. We have Corey Graham signed a couple of days ago. as long as the starters are healthy, we are fine. If Jenkins or McLeod are injured, we are in serious trouble. But on the other side, if we were talking last year, same topics, and you told me that Higgs, Sproles, and Jason Peters are going to be injured, I would say we are done.
Even after Carson, wow, spoken like a confident Czech. Philip is definitely not your average Czech. Usually they have a sort of pessimistic view on life in general. But I'll say one thing about the receivers. I think Michael Wallace is an upgrade than Torrey Smith. He has better hands. I think you have the same concerns you have with Torrey Smith. Can he be someone you can count upon? And if you remember Smith last year, he was pretty much the speed guy. So he was the guy using as almost as a deception. To me, the entire key last year was Alshon Jeffries. He was the first time we've had a receiver since Deshaun Jackson and also Terrell Owens, who was inducted to the Hall of Fame, as an Eagle, by the way, that to where you had to account for him on the field every single play. And he did that with a torn rotator cuff. And I love that signing last year. He signed for 1 year, $14 million, a prove-it year. And I thought Alshon Jeffrey, when he was with the Bears, if he broke a fingernail, he was out for like 4 games. I do share same concerns on the linebacker side. We're not going to beat that. The defensive line is going to be interesting, especially if Bennett is suspended because he has his trial in Houston on the 18th of September. And then, of course, you have Brandon Graham, who's getting a little bit older, and he's also coming. I think he had the high ankle sprain.
Yeah, he's injured. And Tim Jedigan, don't forget for him.
Don't forget about him.
Nobody knows when he's coming back. So at the first part of the season, we are going to have some troubles there. But on the other side, I think Chris Long was great signing last year. He proved well in the playoffs. We were lucky to have him. And on the other side, we have
Bennett and Derek
Barnett there to help out. So still we have kind of depth there. And even the rookies from last year in Eli Qualls and Aziz Chitu, there is a couple of players who can contribute there. So I expect Eagles to do the same as last year, to send the waves of defensive linemen on the field. Right. So even if you don't have the top players, you have fresh players, which is important. So in second half of the game, as you have a heavy rotation on D-line, you can hide the talent problems there.
Yeah, exactly. And the late Jim Johnson tried that theory with the Eagles and just have waves of defensive linemen coming off the bench. Punter is also a concern. This guy, Chris Johnston, is definitely struggling in camp, it seems like, with his directional punting. And the Eagles lost Donnie Jones, which was kind of a weird way for him to go. I don't know if you read anything about that.
Yeah, I'm very surprised that they didn't bring any competition to training camp, because Howie Roseman usually likes to have a competition there. If you look at the cornerbacks, you have obviously at least 4 players capable of starting right now at the cornerback position, and you have at least 2-3 more talented players who could be pushing for a spot in different teams. So it's very surprising for me that they didn't bring anybody to compete against them.
Yeah, especially. But Jones, the Eagles released a statement to where he was retiring, but then he never filled out his retirement papers. I don't know if that ever came about, if he did, but he's probably the best situational punter and maybe the greatest Eagles punter of all time. So that's actually a huge loss, because you're going to have games where the offense just isn't clicking, and they're going to have to rely on their defense and the punter to, really, when field position becomes the major battle there. So those are some of the concerns. It's interesting to listen to Philip. He thinks there's strengths where I think there's weaknesses, and I think there's strengths where he sees weaknesses. So we're going to see how it plays out. We have a couple of more minutes. You're not off running anywhere, are you?
No.
Okay, good. So let's say, hypothetically, the entire division in the NFC East stays healthy. Who do you think, coming into the season now on paper, of course, before injuries and training camp, is the biggest challenge to the Eagles in the NFC East?
I think it's Redskins. I'm not buying into Dak Prescott hype. I think he's below average player who was lucky in the first season. And in the Giants, Eli is washed up either. So, and still Giants signed Nate Soldier as a left tackle. I think they drafted one of the players in the second round, but still the offensive line there is a big problem. And although Begum is prima donna, or I don't know if you have words in English for it.
That's the word we use. Absolutely.
So I think the Redskins worries me most.
Okay.
Yeah, they have good, talented coach. I think I'm a big fan of Alex Smith for years. I think he's underdog as quarterback. But he's a good player, decent player. They have good overall team. Like you have some strengths on both Giants and Cowboys, but they have the weaknesses. But I think Redskins are equal at all fronts. But we'll see.
One person you forgot to mention on the Giants, the Eli is back. And yeah, I agree with Eli. He's never been a dominant. He had one or two good seasons. I know he won Super Bowls, but statistically wise, he's only really had one or two. However, they did beef up the offensive line. They actually have a good core of wide receivers and tight ends after Odell Beckham Jr. And then they bring the most hyped running back coming into the league in Saquon Barkley since Adrian Peterson.
Yeah. But we were talking about who's the most likely team to advance into playoffs. On the other side, it seems like Giants has received for Eagles for last couple of years. Like both games this year or this past year were very competitive into late game.
Right.
So I think Giants are biggest threat to Eagles, but I think Redskins are second best team after Eagles overall in NFC East.
Okay. Yeah, I don't disagree with you on Alex Smith. I think it's a good stopgap quarterback until the Redskins decide what they're going to do. The best thing about the Redskins is that they have Daniel Snyder still the owner, and that guy is probably one of the worst owners in all of sports, not just in the NFL, along with Jerry Jones. They just can't get out of each other's ways and understand the idea of consistent leadership. I also think the Cowboys, they probably will finish dead last. They've done nothing at the wide receiver position. They made no significant additions to that team. They lost a lot. You lose, the overpriced and out of work Des Bryant, but didn't really replace him. They replaced him with Alan Hearns from Jacksonville, who's a nice, steady receiver, but he's not, dominant anyway. They do get Ezekiel Elliott back, who is a difference maker. But on the defensive side of the ball, I don't see the Cowboys doing anything else. So I think they're probably going to finish last. What about overall in the NFC? Who do you think are the contenders?
I just one last thing. You were talking about what I wanted to say is you have Dave Gettleman as a general manager of Giants, and if you read any of his takes or see any of press conferences, he seems like general manager from 80s. So why you draft a running back with a second pick? So I think as good as Howie Roseman is at this point, then Gettleman is taking Giants back, and that's why I think they are not the second best team in NFC. And in NFC overall, it's very stuck this year. Like if you compare to AFC, NFC is very stuck. I don't know what to think about Rams. They brought a lot of good players there. But you remember the dream team with the Eagles or I think Broncos one of the years with the Peyton Manning. They signed a lot of players and it didn't pan out. So I don't know if it's a good idea to build team through signing a lot of expensive players. And Aqib Talib is not a young player.
Right.
And other teams, I think Vikings could be very good. They finally have legit quarterback.
And Kirk Cousins, the guy formerly of the Redskins. It's interesting what you said about the Rams, and they bring in, of course, Aqib Talib, not known to be a high character guy. You have Marcus Peters, and if you're the best cornerback in the league, and Andy Reid values cornerbacks, and he's getting rid of you, there's something there. And don't forget they bring in Ndamukong Suh, who is probably the dirtiest player there, and you have Aaron Donald, who's holding out, and he's a great player. And I go back to the fact they're character guys. And what the Eagles did last year, their free agent signings, we talked about Jeffrey, but they also brought in Chris Long, LeGarrette Blount, and Torrey Smith. All guys that made significant contributions, didn't dominate, but they all knew how to win a Super Bowl, and they're all high character guys. So I think you're absolutely right, because in 2011 the Eagles got burned bringing the dream team, and they brought in some guys that weren't high character guys and just very selfish players. But you can't get over and you also want to see how Jared Goff adapts. He has a new number one wide receiver in Brandon Cooks that the Patriots got rid of. So that team is going to be very interesting. I think the 49ers, the Jimmy Garoppolo, will be an interesting way to see how now that teams have film on him, how he's going to handle that. And he seems to be also a quarterback that enjoys the spotlight out there. But I like to see what the 49ers are building. You can't count out the Green Bay Packers. They made some free agent signings and they get Aaron Rodgers back. But the Vikings defense just seemed to be very dominant last year. And with, like you said, finally Kirk Cousins has contract stability, that maybe he will step up his game. Because the knock on him with the Redskins is he just would not step up when they needed them to win. Statistically, he was great. But when it came time to get the team to the playoffs or into the playoffs, he seemed to falter down the stretch. So he'll be an interesting experience there. What about the AFC as we almost wrap up the show? What do you think about the teams over there? It's kind of interesting way that AFC is forming.
Yeah, AFC, it's Patriots and who else? Like
Steelers? Jacksonville?
I think Jacksonville, but they don't have a quarterback. I don't get why they signed Blake Bortles for that expensive contract. It makes no sense. I think there was a lot of better quarterbacks as a free agents this year. But Texans, I think they could be very good. They will have Watson back healthy, and they could be good.
Yeah, especially in the AFC South, where you don't really have a dominant team down there, and the Texans. The Texans should be able to win that division if Watson stays healthy. They have the wide receiver and DeAndre Hopkins, who a lot of people believe is the best in the league.
Also, I think Titans with the new coach, they could be very good because they were able to squeeze into the playoffs with that smash mount old offensive concepts, and they have a lot of talented players there, mainly on the offense. They have Derrick Henry, they have Marcus Mariota, who can throw touchdowns to himself.
Yeah, and unfortunately, your boy DeMarco Murray didn't make the team. Is he in the league?
I think he retired.
Did he retire? Yeah. I think they cut him. I think because of Henry, and so he retired there. But DeMarco, hey, hope maybe he'll get another shot with another team. I think also the big storyline in the AFC too is John Gruden. What are your thoughts about that? John Gruden coming back to coaching after being out for about roughly 10 years.
Yeah, obviously I started watching football when Gruden retired from his coaching career, so I don't know him probably as much as you do. But what I like was the quarterback camps with John Gruden on the YouTube. But we'll see. It seems very awkward that his best player, was Khalil Mack, is now in some conflict with him.
Yep.
He's holding out for a new contract, but the rumors are they don't go along well. But I just read some story about John Gruden a couple of days ago, and Derek Carr said it's like John Gruden's quarterback camp 24 hours per day, that he's explaining everything, and even if he's not on the field, he's staying with John Gruden and he's giving him mistakes. So I think he could have positive impact on Derek Carr as a quarterback, but I don't know if he can run the team there because there are some conflicts inside. He bring fullback, which looks very it was expensive fullback. I don't remember the name, but yeah. So, and also I read that he had some conflict with Donald Bennett, who's his left tackle. So probably John Gruden is a hard person to get along well, and he has 10 years, very expensive contract.
Yeah, it's quite you don't know if Gruden is more of a persona than he is as a coach. His coaching career before going to the broadcast booth was quite mixed. He had a lot of success with the Oakland Raiders. Of course, he wins the Super Bowl in Tampa Bay. But he won it with Tony Dungy's players. He was a coach of the Eagles back in the day as an offensive coordinator. And people in Philadelphia still want John Gruden because he gave this apparent passionate speech. And then Buccaneers went out and kicked our ass in the Vet Stadium, the last game ever. They still want him there. But the history of coaches coming out of retirement so many years later just doesn't bode well. I point to the Redskins. They brought Joe Gibbs back after so many years, and he lasted 2 years. And then the Redskins again, they bring back Mike Shanahan, who, completely mishandled the RG3 situation, but also the games that passed these guys by. And I think the Raiders, for, like you said, 10 years, $100 million or whatever they're giving Gruden, I think it's going to be a failure out there. Gruden coaching these young players today, it's just a different way to communicate, and he has to learn how to communicate with those players. His time in Tampa Bay, I think he went through about 45 quarterbacks, it seemed. Even Jeff Garcia said it was very hard to work with John Gruden. But he is a storyline in the NFL this year, and of course the eyes will be on him. All right, Philip, what are you looking for tonight as we wrap up the show in the preseason? Anything? Nothing?
Yeah, I'm looking forward to see our young players in the preseason game. Nate Sudfeld mainly, because both Carson Wentz and now even Nick Foles has some nagging injuries. So I'm looking forward to Nate Sudfeld, honestly, because he looked pretty well in the last game of the season, of the regular season last year against Dallas. If you remember, there were a couple of people calling him to play in the playoff instead of Nick Foles, which seems funny now, but the reality is that he looked athletic and pretty good in that last game. Even the offense didn't deliver any point on the other side. But
anyone else?
Yeah. Anyone else? I'm definitely interested what our backup corners are going to show, because we have obviously starters in Ronald Darby and Jalen Mills, but there is Sidney Jones, it's Rasul Douglas, Devontae Bowsby, Avonte Maddox, and even players like DJ Killings, and I forget the name of the second rookie corner. So we have a lot of depth there, and I would like to see how those players perform. And
yeah, I share the same sentiments. It's the first preseason game. There's always a little even a hype for that, coming off a Super Bowl championship. Looking forward to see Sudfeld, Sidney Jones et al. Dallas Goedert will probably get some snaps, see how the backup offensive linemen, defensive linemen do as they battle for positions. But other than that, just keep the team healthy.
Yeah.
Keep the team
healthy. And
who
who I can't wait to see is Jordan Mailata.
Yes.
So it's first take of him. I hope he will play at least 2-3 drives, because if you saw any pictures of him, the guy is huge and massive. And also,
well, who is he? I mean, who is this? Why do you want to see Jordan Mailata? He's a 7th round pick. What makes him so special?
It's some Austria rugby player going to play American football. He didn't know anything about American football a year ago at this moment. So, but the guy is super big, super athletic. He looks like natural offensive lineman, and I hope that the Eagles will finally have this kind of player working, because if you remember Villanueva, we will see him today playing for Steelers. He is their starting left tackle. He spent I think 2 seasons with us, but he was playing defensive lineman, so they actually mishandled him. They put him on the wrong position on defense instead of offense, and the guy is now I think 2 seasons in a row starting left tackle for Pittsburgh Steelers. And also there is another player on our offensive line, which is
Matt Pryor. I think he was a 6th round draft.
Yeah, so he's playing on the guard position, and everyone looks like he's going to be a very good player. I already read some rumors that he can beat out
Chase Warmack and maybe
even
Isaac Seumalo
for the backup position. So those are players I'm looking forward to see. Also, Eagles acquired a lot of wide receivers this offseason. So there are the obvious starters in Jeffrey and Aguilar and Wallace, but there are the second string players. I think everyone is a big fan of help me again. The second year receiver.
Oh, Matt Collins.
Matt Collins.
Yeah, Matt Collins.
and they brought a couple of experienced players there. Marcus Wheaton.
Yeah. Philip's more excited for this game than I am. That's for sure. We got a lot of intrigue there, and good points about Villanueva, who was a former Army Ranger and I think Chip Kelly brought him to Philadelphia, put him on the practice squad at least to play with the team for 2 years. Steelers picked him up and turned him into an all-pro left tackle. And, of course, Jordan Mailata, who was an Australian rugby player, never even played American football, and the Eagles drafted him in the 7th round, so they think he could be an outstanding prospect.
They traded for him.
They did? They traded up in the draft. They moved up in the draft to get Jordan Mailata, so there you go. And, it's going to be an interesting thing. And talking about the wide receivers, maybe there's another Paul Turner out there that can steal the hearts of the Eagles fans. So, this is the bird's eye view from Prague. It's the Matt and Philip show. We hope to make this a consistent thing. People that listen to me over the years know I get consistent and then drop off, but hopefully that won't be the case today. Enjoy the NFL season, and thank you for listening and tuning in. And remember to inspire the inspiration. Don't wait for the inspiration to inspire you. Thanks a lot, everybody. Have a great day.
Yeah, here.